tonight we drift back, not just a few centuries, not even a few millennia, but into the vast, dim reaches of imagination itself, to the story of how the Greeks believed everything began. Imagine lying under a night sky with no city lights, no hum of cars, no buzzing phone by your pillow, just stars. Thousands upon thousands of them, scattered like powdered sugar across black velvet. In those ancient skies, our ancestors saw more than pinpricks of light. They saw patterns, living forces, and the stirrings of gods. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love for you to drop a comment with your location and local time. It's always fun to see who's listening together across the world. Now dim the lights, soften your surroundings, and let's quietly step into tonight's story. At first, there is nothing. Not even the kind of nothing where you're just bored at home staring at a blank wall. Worse than that, a void, an abyss, a shapeless expanse that the Greeks simply called chaos. No sound, no form, no cozy narrator, just silence. Out of that dark, the first beings stir. They aren't quite gods in the way we picture Zeus with his thunderbolts or Athena with her war helmet. They're forces, ideas made flesh. First comes Gaia, the earth itself. Imagine the ground beneath your feet slowly waking up, stretching, becoming a personality. Then emerges Tartarus, a shadowy pit so deep it makes the Mariana Trench look like a puddle. Next comes Eros, not the chubby baby with wings from Valentine's cards, but a raw force of attraction, the spark that pulls things together. Out of chaos also step Nyx, the velvet night, and Erebus, the darkness lurking in shadows. It's less of a family dinner, more like an abstract art exhibition where the art suddenly walks off the wall and introduces itself. Gaia, lonely in her vastness, brings forth Uranus, the sky. He's a bit of a moody partner, stretching over her, covering her, pressing close. Together, earth and sky begin to fill the void with life. First come the mountains, jagged and proud, then the seas, lapping and restless, and then children stranger still, beings of immense power, raw and unpolished. These are the Titans, each one vast, radiant, and destined for drama. But not all their children are so majestic. Gaia and Uranus also give birth to monstrous forms, the Cyclopes with a single fiery eye, and the Hecatonchires, who are honestly the stuff of nightmares, giants with 50 heads and 100 hands. Imagine tucking that one into bed at night. Uranus, horrified at these bizarre offspring, does what far too many gods in mythology will do. He tries to hide them away. He shoves them down into the depths of Gaia's body, forcing them into Tartarus, out of sight, out of mind. And Gaia? Well, imagine being forced to swallow your own children and having them trapped inside you. Yeah, she's not happy. Her pain and fury grow, and soon she begins plotting. Here's our first mainstream historical fact to ground us. The Greeks didn't see the earth as a lifeless ball floating in space. To them, the world itself was alive, an active motherly presence. That's why Gaia, or G, is where we get the word geology. Even our modern science quietly whispers her name. But mythology doesn't stay quiet for long. Gaia fashions a plan. She creates a great sickle, sharp and gleaming, and looks to her Titan children for help. Who will stand against their father, Uranus? The older ones hesitate because, let's be honest, facing Dad with a cosmic sword is not exactly a family bonding activity. But one steps forward. Cronus, the youngest Titan, ambitious and bold. He takes the sickle and hides, waiting for the right moment. Night falls. Uranus descends upon Gaia, as usual, covering her, pressing close. And there, Cronus leaps forth, striking with the sickle. In one savage motion, he severs Uranus's power forever. The sky recoils, bleeding starlight, and Cronus hurls the remains into the sea. Out of that sea foam, by the way, something extraordinary will one day arise, but we'll save her entrance for later. From the drops of Uranus's blood that spatter the earth, other beings spring forth, the Erinyes, the Furies, those winged avengers who chase down the guilty, the giants, towering and terrible. Even the delicate Meliae, nymphs of the ash tree, are born from that violent act. In Greek myth, even spilled blood is fertile. And with Uranus gone, Cronus now stands supreme. But as we'll see, overthrowing your father sets a dangerous precedent. What's done to the parent can all too easily be done to the child. Here's the quirky tidbit you probably didn't hear in school. Some ancient sources claim Uranus wasn't just sky, but a kind of star-studded dome, literally pressed against the earth like a lid. Which means that when Cronus struck him down, he wasn't just rebelling, he was cracking open the universe. Historians still argue whether this was meant as a mythological metaphor for the Greeks' shift from old tribal gods to newer Olympian ones, or if it was just a particularly dramatic bedtime story gone wild. For now, though, Cronus stands victorious, sickle in hand, his siblings cheering. The world seems open and bright, but Gaia, wise as ever, whispers a warning. She tells him, "Just as you overthrew your father, so too shall one of your children overthrow you." And with that prophecy, the stage is set for endless cycles of power, betrayal, and family drama. Because in Greek mythology, the only thing more reliable than love or thunderbolts is that sooner or later, your kids will try to take your throne. Cronus now reigns, standing tall as the chief among Titans, his sickle gleaming with the echoes of his father's fall. With Uranus banished to the shadows, the world feels wider, lighter, freer. The Titans step forward into their new dominion: Oceanus, the vast encircling river; Hyperion, lord of the sun's first blaze; Coos, Phoebe, Rhea, Themis, and others, each carrying a power that shapes existence. Cronus takes his sister, Rhea, as his queen, because yes, Greek gods rarely bothered with awkward family boundaries. Together, they look poised to usher in a golden age. Under their rule, the world blooms. Crops grow, rivers swell, the air is mild. Humanity, such as it is, begins to thrive. Later poets would call this the Golden Age, a time when men lived without toil, without grief, without the need to lock their doors at night. People supposedly just lounged in the sun, occasionally feasting, never aging, and dying as gently as falling asleep. Basically, a lifelong vacation with no rent. But of course, if there's one thing Greek mythology promises, it's that no paradise lasts forever. Cronus cannot forget Gaia's prophecy. As you overthrew your father, so too shall one of your children overthrow you. He becomes haunted by it. You know that creeping anxiety you get when your smoke detector makes a mysterious beeping sound in the middle of the night? Cronus lives with that 24/7, only his beeping is the thought of an ambitious child coming for his throne. And so he hatches a plan, a gruesome, paranoid plan. Each time Rhea gives birth, Cronus snatches the newborn and, without a shred of hesitation, swallows it whole. Not exactly Father of the Year material. Inside his belly he keeps them, alive but imprisoned, swallowed by fear and darkness. The first child, Hestia, goddess of the hearth, gone. The second, Demeter, goddess of harvest, swallowed. The third, Hera, future queen of the gods, down the hatch. Next came Hades, lord-to-be of the underworld, and then Poseidon, destined to rule the seas. One by one, Cronus gulps them down, confident that the throne is safe. Imagine Rhea, though, watching every infant ripped from her arms. Her grief turns into simmering rage. Here's our mainstream historical fact check. The Greeks told this cycle of father swallowing children as a mythological echo of older cultural transitions. In ancient times, conquering tribes often absorbed or erased the gods of the cultures they overtook. Cronus devouring his offspring reflects that uneasy tension, the old order desperately trying to consume and suppress the new. But myths aren't meant to end in despair forever. Rhea decides she will not let all her children vanish. When her next child is born, tiny Zeus, the sixth, she devises a trick. She flees to a cave on the island of Crete, where sacred nymphs raise the child in secret. To keep Cronus distracted, she swaddles a stone in blankets, handing it to her husband. Cronus, none the wiser, and clearly not the most observant eater, swallows the stone whole, patting his belly with grim satisfaction. Meanwhile, Zeus grows in hiding, nourished by the goat Amalthea, whose milk sustains him. Local legend claims that when Zeus accidentally snapped off one of her horns, it became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, forever spilling food and drink. One small oops turns into humanity's symbol of abundance. And the baby's cries? You'd think Cronus might notice. But no, the curates clad in bronze perform wild dances, clashing their spears against shields to mask Zeus's wails. Picture an ancient rock concert designed purely as a baby monitor. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some versions say Zeus was raised not just on goat milk, but on honey from sacred bees. Yes, bees. Which gives us the bizarre but wonderful image of a future thunder god toddling around sticky-faced, chewing on honeycomb while destiny waits outside the cave. As Zeus grows into youth, he knows what must be done. With the help of Medusa, a clever goddess of wisdom, he prepares a potion. This potion isn't meant for himself, but for Cronus. He tricks his father into drinking it, and the results are immediate and, well, let's just say Cronus experiences the world's most dramatic case of food poisoning. One by one, he vomits up the swallowed gods. First, Hestia, then Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. All fully grown, all furious, all ready for revenge. Suddenly, Cronus finds himself not with one rival, but 6. The prophecy is closing in, and the war for the cosmos is about to ignite. Now, here's where mythology zooms out from family squabbles to full-blown cosmic warfare. The Titanomachy, the 10-year battle between the Titans and the Olympians. The battlefield stretches across heaven, earth, and sea. Mountains crash, seas boil, thunder splits the skies. The younger gods, led by Zeus, fight fiercely, but the Titans hold their ground, towering and ancient. But Zeus has something the Titans lack: allies locked away by Cronus's cruelty. He descends into Tartarus, freeing the Cyclops and the 100-handed Hecatonchires from their prison. In gratitude, the Cyclops forge for him weapons of unimaginable power. For Zeus, the thunderbolt; for Poseidon, the trident; for Hades, a helmet of invisibility. Armed with these, the Olympians turn the tide. Imagine Zeus standing on a mountain peak, hurling bolts that split the sky, while Poseidon shakes the oceans and Hades vanishes into shadow, striking unseen. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 hands, rain stones down like catapults, overwhelming the Titan ranks. The battle is brutal, endless, like a cosmic tug-of-war. Historians still argue whether this myth mirrors real ancient conflicts, perhaps the shift from older agricultural cults, the Titans, to newer, sky-focused gods, the Olympians. Or maybe it's just humanity's way of turning thunderstorms and earthquakes into an epic family drama. Either way, the story's energy is unmistakable. At last, Cronus and his allies falter. One by one, the Titans are hurled into Tartarus, chained deep in the abyss, guarded forever by the 100-handed giants. The cosmos is reborn under new rulers. The Olympians ascend to Mount Olympus, gleaming and high, their thrones carved from cloud and light. Zeus, with his siblings beside him, looks out over a world trembling with possibility. But even in this triumph, the seeds of future trouble stir. For in Greek mythology, peace is always just the pause between storms. The Titans are gone, locked away in Tartarus, their chains clanging in the abyss. The younger gods now claim the heights of Olympus, crisp mountain air swirling around their thrones. From here, Zeus looks out over the cosmos and realizes winning the war was only half the battle. Governing is harder. Who gets which realm? Who rules the seas? Who commands the underworld? And who stays up top? It's basically the divine version of trying to split an apartment lease with 6 roommates. So the brothers draw lots. Zeus, with a bit of fate's luck, wins the sky and the heavens. Poseidon draws the sea, vast and mysterious. And Hades, unlucky but stoic, takes the underworld, that shadowy kingdom beneath the earth. The sisters, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, aren't given whole realms, but instead play vital roles. Hera becomes queen of marriage and family, Demeter governs the harvest, and Hestia tends the hearth flame, the center of every home. It isn't a perfect arrangement, but it sticks. The world finally has rulers who can balance one another, even if balance sometimes means throwing thunderbolts in each other's faces. Still, trouble brews. Cronus may be chained, but not all of the Titans are silent. Some whisper in the shadows. The earth itself groans beneath Olympus, and deep in the cosmos lurk older, stranger forces not so easily tamed. But before we dive into new threats, let's pause and savor this moment. The Olympian order has begun. The gods build their palace atop Mount Olympus, carved not from stone, but from brilliance itself. Imagine white marble walls gleaming, with clouds for carpets and winds for curtains. When the gods gather here, their laughter rolls like thunder, and their feasts echo with nectar and ambrosia, the divine food and drink that keeps them immortal. Now, you might be wondering, what about humans in all this? Good question. According to the myths, mankind exists, but lives in fragile balance. The gods notice us, sometimes favor us, sometimes torment us. The Olympians aren't distant stars, they're nosy neighbors with superpowers, dropping in uninvited. Zeus in particular keeps one eye on the mortals. Sometimes he helps them. Sometimes he tests them. And sometimes, well, let's just say Zeus isn't famous for keeping his divine affections strictly professional. But that's a story for later sections. For now, the Olympians are basking in triumph, but Gaia, Mother Earth, hasn't forgotten the suffering of her imprisoned children. The Titans, the Cyclopes, the Hecatontures, her womb was torn open again and again, and she's furious. Out of her wrath, she gives birth to another force, Typhon. And here we come to one of the most terrifying monsters in all mythology. Typhon isn't your run-of-the-mill dragon. He's described as taller than mountains, his head brushing the stars, his eyes glowing fire. From his shoulders sprout not arms, but writhing serpents, each hissing with venom. His voice is a chorus of beasts, sometimes roaring like a lion, sometimes shrieking like 1,000 owls. Basically, the stuff of nightmares, if your nightmares came with surround sound. Zeus, who just got comfy on his throne, suddenly finds himself facing this cosmic horror. The battle between them shakes the world. Typhon breathes fire, scorching mountains into ash. Zeus hurls thunderbolts, splitting skies into blinding flashes. The seas rise, forests burn, and even the gods of Olympus flee in terror, some disguising themselves as animals to hide. Hermes is said to have turned into a bird, Apollo into a swan, Artemis into a cat. It's like an ancient version of running for the emergency exit. But Zeus doesn't run, he fights. With the full fury of his thunderbolts, he manages to strike Typhon, driving him down. Some myths say he traps Typhon under Mount Etna in Sicily, which is why the volcano still smolders and erupts, Typhon struggling beneath the earth, his fiery breath breaking through. Next time you see news of Etna erupting, you can imagine it's not geology, but a really annoyed monster trying to wiggle free. This is our quirky tidbit. Some ancient poets claim Typhon wasn't just a monster, but the father of storms. Every hurricane, tornado, or howling wind was believed to be Typhon's lingering fury. Think about that the next time you're stuck in bad weather. It's not meteorology, it's mythology. Historians still argue whether Typhon's story was a way for ancient Greeks to explain volcanic eruptions, or whether it symbolized chaos itself, forever threatening to undo order. Either way, the myth makes clear, even after victory, the Olympians can never rest. With Typhon subdued, Zeus finally secures his reign. The world settles into its shape: sky, sea, underworld, and earth. Mortals grow bolder, temples rise, offerings are made. The Olympians grow accustomed to worship, to being flattered, feared, and adored. It's a new chapter in the cosmic story. But remember Gaia's warning, the cycle of children overthrowing parents? That shadow hasn't gone away. It lingers in Zeus's own household, where children will someday threaten him just as he threatened Cronus. For now, though, Zeus enjoys his throne, lightning bolt in hand, clouds swirling at his command. He has won the war, defeated the monster, and placed himself as ruler of gods and men. Yet the truth of Greek mythology is that peace is never permanent. The Olympians may sit on their high thrones, but family drama, betrayals, and tricksters are always waiting in the wings. And in the heart of this divine soap opera, immunity is about to get its first great champion. One Titan who dares to defy Zeus himself. The thrones of Olympus gleam, the gods recline in their radiant halls, and the air is thick with the scent of ambrosia. But if you've ever been to a big family gathering, you know it doesn't take long before arguments break out. And these aren't ordinary squabbles over who gets the last slice of pie. These are gods, Their quarrels shake the world. Zeus sits at the head, his thunderbolt propped like a staff beside him. Across from him is Hera, queenly and fierce, her crown set perfectly straight. You might think they're a power couple, and in some ways they are, but their marriage is the definition of complicated. Zeus is charming, magnetic, and, well, let's call him romantically overenthusiastic. Hera knows it, and she doesn't take betrayal lightly. Their spats are legendary, thunderous arguments that mortals could feel in the crack of a sudden storm. Meanwhile, Poseidon often bristles. He rules the sea, yes, but sometimes he feels overshadowed by his brother's dominance in the sky. Imagine being the god of earthquakes and waves and still thinking, hey, why does Zeus get all the temples? Poseidon's temper is tidal, calm one moment, crashing the next. Then there's Hades, who doesn't live on Olympus at all. He stays in the underworld, away from the feasts, tending the souls of the dead. Quiet, brooding, occasionally popping up with stern demands. He's the sibling who lives far away and only visits when necessary, usually to remind everyone he exists. The sisters, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera, each play critical roles, but their bonds are tangled. Demeter cares deeply for humanity, teaching them agriculture, yet she's prone to fury when slighted. Hestia, gentle and modest, avoids drama altogether, keeping the hearth flame steady. But Hera, as we'll see again and again, brings the fire of vengeance when Zeus strays. Here's the first mainstream historical fact for this section. The Olympians reflect human society. The Greeks didn't invent perfect gods. They created gods who mirrored their own messy families, politics, and tempers. Temples weren't built to flawless beings. They were built to cosmic personalities who loved, schemed, and got jealous just like people. And oh, the jealousy. Let's talk about Hera's greatest hits. Whenever Zeus took a liking to a mortal woman or even a mortal man, Hera made it her mission to punish someone, usually not Zeus himself, but the poor bystanders. Call it divine misdirected anger. One tragic example is Io, a priestess of Hera, whom Zeus pursued. To hide her, Zeus turned Io into a cow. Yes, a literal cow. Imagine your boyfriend saying, "Don't worry, babe, I'll keep you safe," and then poof, you're grazing in a field. Hera, suspicious, demanded the cow as a gift. She set a 100-eyed guard, Argus, to watch Io. Eventually, Hermes was sent to rescue her, but Hera punished Io with a gadfly, stinging her endlessly. You can almost hear Hera muttering, "Not on my watch, Zeus." And Hera didn't stop there. Her vengeance extended to offspring born of Zeus's dalliances. Heracles, the strongest hero in Greek mythology, suffered endless trials largely because Hera hated him from the moment of his birth. We'll dive deep into his story later, but for now, keep in mind, no one nursed a grudge like Hera. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. In some local cults, Hera wasn't just a jealous wife, but worshipped as a goddess of 3 stages: Hera the maiden, Hera the wife, Hera the widow. This triple aspect goddess suggests that not all Greeks saw her as just Zeus's nagging spouse. She embodied the full cycle of womanhood. But the family drama isn't just Hera versus Zeus. Poseidon and Athena famously clash. The story goes that both wanted to be patron deity of Athens. To settle the dispute, they each offered a gift. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, and up gushed a salty spring, or in some versions, a war horse. Athena, meanwhile, planted the first olive tree. The Athenians chose the olive, practical and life-giving, and named their city after her. Poseidon, furious. From then on, he held a bit of a grudge against Athens. Even Zeus's children add to the tension. From his head springs Athena, fully grown, armored, and ready for battle. Zeus had swallowed her mother, Metis, trying to prevent just such a birth, but headaches are hard to ignore when they're divine migraines. Athena becomes one of the wisest and most strategic of the gods, but her independence sometimes puts her at odds with her father. Then there's Ares, god of war, bloody and wild, constantly fighting with Athena, who sees war as strategy, not chaos. Ares charges in with brute force, while Athena rolls her eyes like, "Really? That's your plan?" And don't forget about Aphrodite, goddess of love, whose allure ensnares gods and mortals alike. Married to Hephaestus the smith, she famously dallies with Ares, sparking whispers across Olympus. The squabbles are constant. Demeter's rage when Persephone is taken, Apollo competing with Hermes, Dionysus throwing wild parties that leave Olympus in chaos. Imagine Thanksgiving dinner where everyone has divine powers and you're close to the vibe. Historians still argue whether these myths developed as pure storytelling or as reflections of real tensions between city-states. For example, Athena's rivalry with Poseidon may echo political struggles between coastal seafarers and inland farmers. The gods, in this sense, were not just characters, but symbols of real cultural identities. But whether you take them as metaphors or melodrama, the effect is the same. The Olympians are never boring. Their quarrels create storms, wars, and myths that ripple down into the mortal world. Mortals pray, sacrifice, and sometimes just cross their fingers, hoping they won't be caught in the middle of divine sibling drama. But for all their flaws, the Olympians provide structure. Zeus's thunder keeps order, Poseidon's tides keep ships moving, Demeter's fields feed the people, and Hestia's flame warms every home. They may squabble like reality TV stars, but they keep the world spinning. Still, not everyone is content. Among the gods and titans, one figure is quietly watching, scheming, and ready to upset this fragile balance. His name is Prometheus, and his gift to humanity will spark not only fire, but the wrath of Zeus himself. Prometheus sits apart from the other titans, sharp-eyed and thoughtful. His very name means forethought, and unlike his more brutish kin, he thinks ahead, weighs consequences, and plays the long game. While most of the titans chose to side with Cronus during the Great War, Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus, whose name ironically means afterthought, decided to throw their lot in with Zeus. Maybe it was foresight, maybe it was survival instinct, maybe just a hunch. But it put Prometheus in a unique position. He became both a titan and a trusted ally of the Olympians. And Prometheus cares for someone most gods tend to ignore: humanity. To the Olympians, mortals are fragile, short-lived sparks on the vast stage of existence. Useful sometimes, entertaining other times, but ultimately expendable. To Prometheus, though, they are worth protecting. He watches them huddle in caves, shivering, gnawing on raw roots and meat, eyes wide at the dark. No fire to warm them, no knowledge to build with, no spark of progress. Prometheus pities them. One day, Zeus declares that humans must make sacrifices to the gods. Prometheus sees an opportunity. He slaughters an ox, divides it into 2 portions. One portion is all the best cuts, the juicy meat, hidden beneath rough, unappetizing hide and bones. The other is just bones and gristle, but cleverly covered in a glistening layer of fat, gleaming and tempting. Prometheus presents them to Zeus, inviting him to choose. Zeus, falling for the trick, selects the shining pile of fat, uncovering nothing but bones. Humanity keeps the meat. Zeus realizes the deception too late, and his thunderous scowl promises vengeance. From that day, sacrifices to the gods followed this pattern. Humans burn bones and fat on the altar, keeping the edible meat for themselves. A sly titan has shifted the cosmic balance. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Greek sacrifice really did work this way. At altars across the ancient world, worshippers burned the inedible portions for the gods, while the community feasted on the rest. The myth of Prometheus provided an origin story for this very ritual. But Zeus doesn't laugh off the trick. He withholds fire from mankind. No longer will humans warm themselves or cook food. Mortals stumble back into the cold, their nights black and endless. Prometheus, watching from the shadows, he makes his decision. He will not let them suffer. He steals fire from Olympus. In some stories, he hides a glowing ember inside a hollow fennel stalk, carrying it carefully down to earth. Imagine that first spark crackling in human hands, smoke curling upward, flames catching, light spilling into the dark. Humanity's eyes widen, their world transformed. They roast meat, forge tools, drive away beasts. The gift of fire changes everything. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient sources suggest Prometheus didn't just steal fire, but also taught humans writing, math, medicine, even astronomy. Basically, he was the first mythological STEM teacher, minus the whiteboard and with a much worse punishment. Because Zeus doesn't forgive theft. He doesn't forgive defiance. He sentences Prometheus to a punishment that echoes through myth as one of the most brutal ever devised. The Titan is chained to a rock, sometimes said to be high in the Caucasus Mountains, sometimes in the wilderness of Scythia. Bound with unbreakable chains, he lies exposed to wind, rain, and scorching sun. Each day, an enormous eagle swoops down. Its talons dig into his flesh, its beak tears open his side, and it devours his liver. Night falls, the stars gleam, and Prometheus lies weak. But gods don't die easily. His liver regrows, only for the eagle to return the next day, relentless, eternal. Pain without end. Historians still argue whether this myth reflects a deeper symbolic truth. Was Prometheus's liver chosen because ancient Greeks believed it was the seat of courage and vitality? Or was it simply an organ that regenerates, making it the perfect symbol for endless suffering? Either way, the story stuck. Meanwhile, Zeus isn't done. He decides to punish not just Prometheus, but humanity itself. If fire is theirs, then so too shall be sorrow. And so, Zeus commands the creation of the first woman. But that tale, of Pandora, her jar, and the misfortunes that spill forth, is its own turning point, and will arrive there soon. For now, picture Prometheus bound to the clef, his cries echoing against the stone, his defiance unbroken. Below, humanity gathers around new flames, cooking bread, forging metal, chasing shadows away. They do not know the cost, but they live in the light because one Titan dared to rebel. The Olympians feast, Zeus broods on his throne, the eagle circles, and humanity takes its first real step toward civilization. It's a gift and a curse, and a story the Greeks never tired of retelling. The spark that began it all.
The world is not static. To the Greeks, humanity does not remain forever as it was in the beginning. Instead, mankind passes through stages, each age a little further from perfection, a little closer to hardship. This story, The Ages of Man, was told by Hesiod, the ancient poet who wove myths into lessons, and it offers a lens through which we can glimpse how the Greeks understood human decline and struggle. At the start, there was the Golden Age. Imagine it, humans living like children of the earth itself, free from pain and toil. They did not plow, they did not sow. The soil gave its bounty on its own, crops springing up without effort. There was no war, no envy, no death as we know it. When their time came, people simply drifted away like falling asleep. Their spirits became protective daemons, gentle guardians who watched over the living. This was humanity in its purest, untouched form. But paradise rarely lasts. After the Golden came the Silver Age. These humans were still strong, but weaker of mind. They lived long childhoods, never maturing until late in life. When adulthood came, they were reckless, quarrelsome, and foolish. Worst of all, they refused to honor the gods. Zeus, displeased, wiped them away. They became the blessed spirits of the underworld, but not revered like the guardians of the Golden Age, a shadow of something lost. Then came the Bronze Age, a harsher time. The people of this era were mighty, yes, but violent. They built homes of bronze, wielded weapons of bronze, lived for war. Their hearts were as hard as their metal. They destroyed themselves in endless battles, and when they fell, they descended nameless into Hades. Unlike the others, they left behind no blessings, no guardianship, only silence. Yet from this darkness, the myths say arose the Age of Heroes. This was not in Hesiod's original sequence, but later poets inserted it as a kind of exception. Unlike the Bronze, this age gave rise to noble men, Achilles, Odysseus, Heracles, and others whose deeds would echo in song. Though they too perished, many were granted a special afterlife on the Isles of the Blessed, where peace and light prevailed. It was a reminder that greatness, though fleeting, could elevate mortals closer to the divine. And then, finally, comes the Iron Age. This is the age of Hesiod himself, and, by extension, of us. An age of toil and sorrow. Humans labor endlessly, plowing, sowing, sweating under the sun. Children are born into hardship, elders waste away, justice is easily corrupted. Brothers quarrel, hospitality weakens, oaths are broken. Every generation is worse than the one before. Even now, Hesiod wrote he wished he had been born either earlier or not at all. It is a bleak picture, yet one deeply revealing. The myth of the ages of man was not just a story, it was a worldview. The Greeks looked at their struggles, wars, famines, betrayals, and believed they were living in decline from something better. They carried within them a sense of loss, that humanity had once stood closer to the divine and was now stumbling further away. A quirky fact for you: Hesiod's timeline places the Trojan War within the Age of Heroes. That means when Greeks told the story of Achilles and Hector, they believed it had happened not just in history, but in a brighter, more noble age, one already gone by their own time. To them, Homer's epics were as much myth as memory, a window into a lost golden glow. But even in decline, hope glimmers. The story of the ages is not only about humanity's fall, but about resilience. Iron may be cruel, but it is also strong. The people of the Iron Age endure, survive, and keep the flame of culture alive. They honor gods, tell stories, raise children, build cities. Hardship becomes the forge of identity. And in the midst of this Iron Age, myths continued to unfold. Myths of gifts, of punishments, of strange beginnings. For Zeus was not content simply to let mortals exist. He had a plan to remind them of their place, to keep them humble, to bind them with a story they could not escape. He would give them a companion, one both beautiful and dangerous, a gift and a curse in the same breath. Her name would be Pandora. Pandora's story begins not in her own hands, but in those of the gods.
After Prometheus stole fire from Olympus and carried it down to mortals, a torch of rebellion blazing in the darkness, Zeus was furious. He could not undo fire itself, for it was already kindled in every hearth and every forge, but he could strike at humankind in another way. If Prometheus had lifted them upward, Zeus would balance the scales by pulling them down. So the king of the gods hatched a plan. He would create a being unlike any before, the first woman. Not born of earth and chaos like the old primordial deities, nor forged in war like the sons of men, but carefully, deliberately made. A gift, yes, but one with sharp edges. Hephaestus, the god of the forge, was commanded to shape her body from clay. His hands molded smooth flesh, her form supple and graceful, her features lovely to behold. Athena dressed her, draping her in shining garments, and crowned her with a veil embroidered like the night sky. Aphrodite brushed her hair with desire, giving her the charm to ensnare hearts. Hermes slipped a sly grin onto our lips and placed within her the art of deception, persuasion, and curiosity. When she was finished, she was dazzling. No mortal had ever seen such beauty, no god had ever sculpted such precision. And so they named her Pandora, all gifted, because every god had given something to her. But here's the twist. Though she was called a gift, she was in truth a punishment. Zeus placed in her hands a jar, a pithos, not the dainty little box Victorian translators later imagined. It was a great storage jar, sealed tight. Inside, hidden and swirling, were all the sorrows that could afflict humankind: sickness, toil, envy, greed, despair. With Pandora's arrival, the age of untroubled innocence would be over. She was sent to Epimetheus, brother of Prometheus. Now Prometheus had warned his brother long ago, "Do not accept any gifts from Zeus. Nothing good will come of them." But Epimetheus, whose name literally means afterthought, was not known for his caution. He looked upon Pandora, saw her beauty, heard her voice, and, of course, forgot the warning. He welcomed her into his home, into his life. And it was only a matter of time before curiosity won. Pandora, holding that heavy jar, wondered what could be inside. Perhaps treasures, perhaps secrets. Imagine the tug of it, like a forbidden folder on your desktop or a present under the tree you've been told not to open. One day, her hands could resist no longer. She lifted the lid. And out they flew, all at once. The contents poured into the world like a swarm of wasps. Disease, famine, deceit, sorrow, violence, envy. Each spirit took wing and scattered, embedding itself in the fabric of mortal life. By the time Pandora snapped the lid back on, the jar was nearly empty. Nearly. For inside, at the very bottom, one last thing remained: hope. It trembled there, small and fragile, like a bird that refuses to fly. Was it trapped? Locked away forever so that humans would always suffer without relief? Or was it preserved, kept safe inside the jar, so that whenever humanity needed it, it could be remembered and drawn upon? Scholars have debated this for centuries. Is hope itself a blessing or a cruel trick, giving mortals just enough optimism to endure endless misery? Historians still argue whether Hesiod meant Pandora as a misogynistic cautionary tale, painting women as bringers of trouble, or whether she was a symbol of humanity herself, beautiful yet flawed, endlessly curious, both blessing and curse. After all, without her active opening, the world might never have taken on the shape as we know it. Harsh, yes, but also alive with meaning. A quirky tidbit: in some forgotten corners of Greek tradition, Pandora wasn't the first woman at all, but a kind of earth goddess, a primordial figure of fertility who gave gifts to humankind rather than sorrows. Only later did her myth twist into punishment. This earlier echo suggests that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't meant to be only a villain, but a reflection of the dual nature of life itself. And so humanity changed forever. Where once they had lived untroubled, now they lived with grief, toil, sickness, and yet also with the stubborn ember of hope, a paradox sealed into their fate. It is this paradox that shapes so many myths to come. Suffering balanced with resilience, tragedy with courage, loss with renewal. Which brings us to a tale woven not of punishments, but of cycles. A story that explains why flowers bloom, why leaves fall, why the earth itself breathes with seasons. It begins with a daughter, a mother, and a god of the underworld. It begins with Persephone.
The world shifts now, from jars and punishments to fields and flowers. Imagine yourself in a meadow in ancient Greece. Tall grasses swaying, red poppies pushing up between golden stalks of grain, bees humming lazily in the sunlight. This is the realm of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, the mother of crops, the one whose moods shape the fertility of the land. Her daughter, Persephone, walks with her, bright, youthful, radiant. In myth, Persephone is often described as a flower herself, delicate yet vibrant, her laughter carrying like wind over barley. But someone else notices her beauty. Deep beneath the earth, in his shadowy kingdom, Hades casts his gaze upward. Unlike the stormy Zeus or the capricious Poseidon, Hades rules quietly, almost reluctantly. Yet he too feels desire, and when he sees Persephone picking flowers, he decides she will be his queen. One day, Persephone bends down to pluck a narcissus, a strange, luminous bloom said to have been planted by Gaia herself. As her fingers brush the petals, the ground rumbles. Suddenly, the earth splits open, and from the chasm thunders Hades and his chariot, black horses foaming at the bit. Before Persephone can cry out, he seizes her and disappears into the underworld, the earth closing back like a wound. Her cries echo faintly, but only one hears. Hecate, goddess of thresholds, of torches, of liminal spaces. She hears Persephone's voice, and later guides Demeter toward the truth. For now, though, Persephone vanishes, leaving behind only the flowers she had gathered. When Demeter realizes her daughter is gone, the world changes. She wanders in grief, her golden hair unbound, her torch burning through the night as she searches the earth. Days blur into weeks, and still she walks. Crops wither, seeds refuse to sprout, livestock weaken. Without the goddess of agriculture tending the cycle of life, famine begins to spread across the human world. A historical tidbit here. The myth of Demeter and Persephone was tied closely to the Eleusinian mysteries, a secret religious cult near Athens. These rituals promised initiates a deeper understanding of life, death, and rebirth, and their popularity endured for nearly 2,000 years. Even Roman emperors whispered about them. Historians still argue whether these rites were symbolic plays, psychedelic rites, or something entirely different. But we know they were rooted in this myth of loss and return. Meanwhile, Demeter confronts Zeus. She demands her daughter back, but Zeus hesitates. Hades is his brother after all, and a powerful ruler in his own right. At last, a compromise is struck.
Persephone may return, but only if she has eaten nothing from the underworld. But here's the trick. Persephone, in her hunger, has eaten a few seeds of a pomegranate. Some say 6, some say 4. That act binds her to the realm of the dead. So a bargain is made. For part of the year she will dwell above, reunited with her mother, and during that time Demeter will rejoice and the earth will bloom. But for the other part she must descend again, sitting beside Hades as queen of the underworld. During those months, Demeter's grief chills the soil and winter grips the land. This cycle, the descent and return of Persephone, explains the turning of the seasons. When she rises, flowers burst forth. When she sinks, leaves wither and fall. It is myth as calendar, a poetic way of grounding agriculture in divine story. A quirky detail here. Some ancient sources suggested Persephone wasn't entirely unwilling. They whispered that perhaps she grew to love her throne beside Hades, that she wielded her own power in the underworld as a stern, commanding queen. In certain Orphic traditions, she is even the mother of Zagreus, a mysterious child god of rebirth. This softer angle turns the tale from one of abduction alone into something more complex. Persephone as both victim and ruler, torn between two worlds. And isn't that duality relatable? The Greeks saw themselves reflected in her, always divided, pulled between duty and desire, between life's brightness and the shadows of mortality. The myth doesn't end in despair, though. It ends in rhythm. Each year Persephone departs. Each year she returns. Death and life, winter and spring, sorrow and joy, woven endlessly together. And while the earth stirs again, while flowers rise and the grain grows tall, other myths unfold in this renewed world. Not all are peaceful. Some are stories of toil, monsters, and redemption. Because while Persephone's tale explains the Earth's cycles, another hero's story explains what it means to endure hardship and overcome it. That hero is Heracles, and his 12 impossible labors await. The name Heracles, or Hercules as the Romans later called him, carries weight even today. He is the archetype of the strong man, the hero who bends mountains with his arms, yet the Greek myths remind us that strength alone does not shield one from suffering. His life is a tapestry of triumph and torment, laughter and cruelty, victories that come at prices so steep you wonder whether they were victories at all. Let's set the scene. Heracles is the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Alcmene. Now, Zeus, notorious for his dalliances, disguises himself as Alcmene's husband, Amphitryon, and conceives the child. You can imagine Hera's reaction when she discovers yet another of her husband's affairs. Furious, she marks the boy from the very start. Even his name, Heracles, means glory of Hera, a bitter joke since Hera spends much of his life trying to destroy him. From infancy, the drama begins. One night, Hera sends 2 serpents to crawl into the baby's crib. Instead of crying out, Heracles sits up and strangles them with his tiny fists. Imagine the ancient parents peeking in to check on their child, only to find him giggling over a pair of limp snakes. That's one way to know your baby isn't ordinary. As he grows, Heracles becomes immense in size and strength. He learns wrestling, archery, music, even philosophy. But trouble follows him, driven by Hera's relentless wrath. At one point, he strikes him with madness so intense that he slays his own wife and children. When he comes to his senses, the grief nearly breaks him. Seeking redemption, he turns to the Oracle of Delphi, who commands him to serve Eurystheus, the petty king of Tyrants, and complete a series of tasks. These tasks become the 12 labors of Heracles, legendary feats etched into Greek imagination. Each one tests not just muscle, but cunning, endurance, and willpower. The first is the Nemean lion, a beast whose hide no blade can pierce. Heracles wrestles it barehanded, choking it until it falls limp. He skins it with its own claws and wears the pelt thereafter, a cloak that makes him appear half man, half beast, terrifying in its majesty. Next comes the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with many heads. Cut one, and 2 more sprout. With his nephew Aeolus, Heracles sears each stump to prevent regrowth, finally burying the immortal head under a boulder. A historical fun fact, some scholars think the Hydra may have been a poetic metaphor for swamp gases or malaria around Lake Lerna. Historians still argue whether the labor reflects mythologized disease control. His third task is the Cyrenian Hind, a golden-horned deer sacred to Artemis. This isn't about killing, but capturing. Heracles chases it for a year before finally seizing it gently, proving he can master patience as well as strength. Then, the Erymanthian boar, a monstrous pig rampaging through the countryside. Heracles traps it in snow and drags it back alive. Eurystheus, terrified, supposedly hides in a jar when he sees it, a little comic relief amid the blood and sweat. The fifth labor, cleaning the Aegean stables, sounds mundane, but imagine thousands of cattle and decades of filth. Heracles reroutes 2 rivers to wash them clean in a single day. Ingenious, though historians note this might echo real feats of irrigation and agriculture in ancient Greece. Next, the Stymphalian birds, man-eating creatures with bronze beaks. Using a rattle given by Athena, Heracles startles them into flight and shoots them down with arrows. The Cretan bull follows, a wild, fire-breathing beast that he wrestles into submission. Then, the mares of Diomedes, flesh-eating horses that Heracles tames by feeding them their cruel master. Dark, yes, but fittingly Greek. Labor 9 is the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. At first, she offers it willingly, impressed by Heracles, but Hera stirs confusion, whispers lies, and battle erupts. Depending on the version, Hippolyta either dies or lives, but Heracles secures the girdle nonetheless. Next, the cattle of Geryon, guarded by a triple-bodied giant and his 2-headed dog. Heracles crosses the world to Spain, slays them, and drives the herd back, an epic road trip of mythic proportions. The 11th labor is the apples of the Hesperides, golden fruit guarded by nymphs and a dragon. Here, Heracles cleverly convinces Atlas, the titan who holds up the sky, to fetch them for him. When Atlas tries to leave him stuck with the burden, he tricks him back into place. Strong, yes, but sly too. Finally, the most perilous, capturing Cerberus, the 3-headed hound of Hades. Without weapon or armor, Heracles wrestles the beast into submission and drags it to the surface. Even the underworld bends, for a moment, to his will. Through these labors, Heracles becomes more than a man. He becomes myth incarnate. But notice how many labors involve not just brute force, but cleverness, patience, or compromise. He is a figure of extremes, guilty yet redeemed, violent yet protective, savage yet divine. A quirky tidbit, in one version, Eurystheus rejects some of the labors because Heracles had help, like Aeolus with the Hydra, or because he was paid, such as the Aegean stables. That means technically, Heracles may have had to perform extra labors, up to 14. Bureaucracy, it seems, haunts even heroes. And what of Hera? Despite all her torments, Heracles eventually earns a place on Olympus after his mortal death. He is granted immortality, reconciled with Hera, and even marries her daughter Hebe, goddess of youth. You could call it the strangest family reunion ever. The stepmother who tried to kill him at every turn becomes his mother-in-law. Heracles' tale shows us something essential in Greek mythology. Suffering is not erased, but transformed. Pain becomes endurance, guilt becomes redemption, labor becomes legend. And in his shadow, other heroes rise. Youths who face monsters not of hydra heads or three-headed hounds, but of politics, betrayal, and labyrinthine cunning. One of them is Theseus, and his path leads straight into the winding corridors of the Labyrinth, where the Minotaur waits.
The story of Theseus begins not in a meadow of flowers like Persephone, nor with divine strength like Heracles, but in mystery. His father is Aegeus, king of Athens, but his parentage is tangled with riddles. Some say Poseidon also played a role, gifting the boy with a sea god's blood. Either way, Theseus grows up in Trojan, far from the Athenian court, with his mother, Aethra. When he comes of age, his mother leads him to a great rock. Beneath it lie a sword and sandals, tokens left by Aegeus for his son, should he be strong enough to lift the stone. Theseus heaves it aside with ease and claims his inheritance. Instead of sailing the safe route to Athens, he chooses the dangerous overland path, eager to prove himself through trials. And oh, what trials! The road is littered with bandits and monsters, each with a nasty gimmick. There's Persephone, who clubs travelers with an iron cudgel. Theseus beats him with his own weapon. Cynus, the pine bender, who ties victims between bent trays and tears them apart. Theseus turns the trick on him instead. Siron, who makes passers-by wash his feet before kicking them into the sea to be eaten by a monstrous turtle. Yes, really, meets his end the same way. Then Procrustes, the innkeeper with a bed he forces guests to fit by either stretching them or cutting off their legs. Theseus, of course, gives him a taste of his own hospitality. By the time he reaches Athens, he is already a folk hero, yet recognition isn't immediate. Medea, yes, the same Medea from Jason's saga, now in Athens, tries to poison him, but Aegeus notices his son's sword and embraces him. Father and son are reunited, though not for long, because fate is already steering Theseus toward Crete. Here's the setup. Athens is forced to send a tribute of youths to Crete every few years, a punishment after King Minos' son was killed there. These unlucky young Athenians are cast into the Labyrinth, an endless maze designed by Daedalus, where they are devoured by the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull creature, born of one of mythology's strangest scandals. Let's just say Poseidon, a bull, and Minos' queen created a story the Greeks politely didn't share over dinner. Theseus volunteers to go, determined to end the cycle. When he arrives in Crete, Minos' daughter Ariadne falls in love with him. She secretly gives him a ball of thread, advising him to tie one end at the entrance of the labyrinth and unwind it as he goes. That way, he can trace his path back after slaying the beast. Imagine the scene: the dark corridors twisting endlessly, walls damped with age, the roar of the Minotaur echoing somewhere in the maze. Theseus presses forward, sword in hand, thread unraveling behind him like the trail of a spider. Finally, he comes face to face with the monster, massive, horned, eyes glinting with animal rage. They clash, man against beast, until Theseus drives his blade home.
the Minotaur collapses, and the labyrinth is silent. Following the thread, Theseus escapes with the Athenian youths and Ariadne. On the way home, however, the story takes a cruel twist. On the island of Naxos, Theseus abandons Ariadne while she sleeps. The reasons vary. Some say Dionysus claimed her for himself. Some say Theseus simply betrayed her. Either way, Ariadne wakes to find herself alone, one of the great heartbreaks of mythology. Theseus sails on, but tragedy is not finished. He had promised his father that if he succeeded, he would raise white sails on his return. If he failed, the sails would remain black. Forgetting in his haste, or perhaps struck by divine forgetfulness, Theseus leaves the black sails aloft. From the cliffs of Athens, Achilles sees them, believes his son dead, and throws himself into the sea. From that day, it is called the Aegean Sea. So Theseus becomes king, but his story is not a neat happily ever after. His reign is filled with both triumphs and missteps, alliances and betrayals. He fights Amazons, loses loved ones, even journeys to the underworld at one point, and nearly never returns. A quirky tidbit: Athenians later celebrated Theseus almost as a civic founder, claiming him as the uniter of Attica. Statues of him stood in public squares, a reminder of Athens' pride. Yet historically, scholars debate whether Theseus was a real person mythologized over time or entirely legendary, created to give Athens a heroic, national figure to rival Heracles. But myth doesn't care about strict fact. In storytelling, Theseus's thread stretches farther than the labyrinth. It winds into other tales, connecting him with heroes like Jason and Heracles, weaving him into the grand tapestry of Greek myth. And speaking of Jason, our next journey heads on to the sea, where a ship called the Argo gathers heroes for a quest unlike any other. Now the sea breeze shifts, and our story sails out over open waters. For this next hero, the setting is not a single city, not a dark cave or a twisting labyrinth, but the wide, glittering expanse of the Aegean and Black Seas. Here begins the tale of Jason and the Argonauts, one of the great adventure epics of Greek mythology. Jason is not born into comfort. His father, Aeson, is usurped from the throne of Iolcus by his half-brother Peleus. Jason, still a child, is spirited away to safety. Some say he's raised by the centaur Chiron, the same wise teacher who tutored Achilles and many other heroes. By the time he grows into manhood, Jason is strong, clever, and ready to reclaim what was stolen. But fate always demands a journey. Jason returns to Iolcus and confronts Peleus. The usurper, wary but sly, agrees to give up the throne on one impossible condition. Jason must bring back the Golden Fleece, a shining pelt from a magical ram kept far away in the distant land of Colchis. It's a task designed to destroy him, but Jason accepts without hesitation. To accomplish this, he gathers a crew unlike any other. The ship Argo, built by the craftsman Argus with Athena's guidance, becomes the first great vessel of Greek myth. And the men who board her, legends in their own right. Heracles with his lion's strength, Orpheus with his enchanted lyre, Pastor and Pollux, the twin brothers, skilled in boxing and horsemanship, and many more. Each is a hero, but together they are the Argonauts. Their voyage is filled with wonders and perils. First, they stop on the island of Lemnos, where only women remain, the men having been cursed and killed long ago. Jason and his crew linger perhaps longer than they should, but eventually duty calls them back to the sea. They encounter the Harpies, foul-winged creatures that torment the blind prophet Phineus by snatching away his food. The Argonauts drive them off, earning the prophet's gratitude. In return, he warns them of the clashing rocks, the Symplegades, two enormous cliffs that smash together whenever ships try to pass. With his guidance, the Argonauts release a dove first. It flies through with just its tail feathers clipped. Encouraged, the Argo rows hard, slipping between the rocks just in time before they crash behind her. After that, the rocks remain still forever. At last they reach Colchis, ruled by King Aeetes. He is not eager to give up the golden fleece. Instead, he sets Jason a series of impossible tasks. First, Jason must yoke a pair of fire-breathing bulls, creatures of immense strength. Then he must plow a field with them and sow it with dragon's teeth. From these teeth, warriors will spring up from the earth, fully armed, and Jason must fight them. On his own, he would surely fail, but fate intervenes in the form of Medea, the king's daughter, a sorceress of immense power. Struck by love, some say by the will of the gods, others by her own passion, she agrees to help Jason. She gives him ointments to protect him from the bull's flames and advises him to trick the earthborn warriors into fighting one another by throwing a stone among them. Jason follows her counsel and succeeds. Yet Aeetes still refuses to hand over the fleece. So Medea leads Jason by night to the sacred grove where it is guarded by a never-sleeping dragon. Imagine it, the shimmering fleece hanging on a tree branch, glowing like sunlight woven into wool, while coils of the massive serpent shift and hiss in the shadows. With Medea's magic, Jason lulls the dragon and seizes the prize. They flee Colchis together, but the escape is bloody. Medea betrays her family, even killing her own brother to delay pursuit. She sails with Jason back to Greece, bound now by love, exile, and shared guilt. But Jason's story, unlike Heracles or Perseus's, does not end in triumph. For a time, he and Medea live together and they have children. But Jason's ambition grows restless. In Corinth, he seeks to marry the daughter of a king, casting Medea aside. Betrayed and furious, Medea enacts one of mythology's darkest revenges. She slays Jason's new bride with poisoned gifts, and then in some versions of the myth, kills her own children to punish Jason fully. Jason survives, but his glory is gone. He grows old, bitter, and alone. The once great hero of the Argo dies in obscurity, crushed beneath a rotting beam of his own ship as he sits by the shore mourning all he has lost. It is a tragic arc, rising with adventure and heroism, falling into betrayal and ruin. Yet the Argonauts' voyage remains one of the most beloved tales of Greek mythology, a story of friendship, courage, and the price of ambition. And as the sail of the Argo fades over the horizon, our eyes turn toward another kind of hero, not a wanderer of seas, not a monster slayer, but a king destined to face the cruelties of fate itself, Oedipus. The winds that carried Jason and the Argonauts drift away, and in their place rises another tale, this time a story carved with sharp edges of destiny, monsters, and divine favor. We shift our gaze now to Perseus, a hero whose adventures echo across countless retellings, whose deeds shimmer like the stars that later bore his name. Perseus' story begins before he even takes his first breath. His grandfather, King Achilles of Argos, receives a prophecy. His daughter, Danae, will bear a son destined to kill him. Like any king who's read too many ominous omens, Achilles decides to stop fate in its tracks. He locks Danae away in a bronze chamber, sealed from the world. But prophecy has a way of slipping through iron bars, doesn't it? Zeus, in a moment of mythological creativity, transforms into a shower of golden light, raining down through the roof of Danae's prison. From that divine shimmer, Perseus is conceived. When Achilles discovers the child, he's too afraid of divine punishment to kill him outright. Instead, he places Danae and her infant son into a wooden chest and casts them adrift at sea. It's a less direct kind of murder attempt. Greek kings loved plausible deniability. The chest, however, does not sink. Carried by waves, it drifts to the island of Seriphus, where a kindly fisherman named Dictys rescues them. He raises Perseus like his own, and in time, Perseus grows into a brave young man, strong but untested. Here enters trouble, wrapped in royal robes. Dictys's brother, King Polydectes, develops an unwelcome attraction to Danae. Yet Perseus, protective of his mother, stands firmly in the way. Polydectes, not one for open confrontation, hatches a scheme. He pretends he wants to marry another woman and demands that every man on the island bring him a horse as a wedding gift. Perseus, without such means, boldly declares he can bring something greater, the head of Medusa. It is a rash promise, one Polydectes heezes with a smile. You can almost hear him thinking, "Perfect, this boy will never return." But Perseus is not abandoned. The gods favor him. Hermes offers guidance, and Athena provides wisdom and a polished bronze shield. To succeed, Perseus must first find the Graeae, three ancient sisters who share a single eye and a single tooth among them. Creepy? Absolutely. Useful? Even more so. Perseus, in a clever stroke, snatches their eye mid-pass, refusing to return it until they reveal the path to the nymphs who keep the tools he'll need. From these nymphs, Perseus receives winged sandals to fly, a magical pouch to safely carry Medusa's head, and the helmet of invisibility once worn by Hades himself. Armed with divine equipment, he sets off towards the edge of the world where the Gorgons dwell. Now picture it, a desolate land, statues of warriors frozen mid-scream, their stone bodies scattered like abandoned toys. At the center, the three Gorgon sisters slumber, their hair a writhing nest of venomous snakes. Two are immortal, but one, Medusa, is not. Her face is said to turn any who meet her gaze into stone. With Athena guiding her hand, Perseus approaches silently. He dares not look directly, so he only watches the reflection in his polished shield. Step by careful step, he closes in. The snakes hiss and shift, sensing movement. Then, with one swift strike, his blade severs Medusa's head. From her blood, two beings spring forth, the winged horse Pegasus and the warrior Chrysaor. Even in death, Medusa births mythic wonders. Perseus tucks the head into his pouch and flees, pursued by Medusa's enraged immortal sisters. But with the winged sandals and helm of invisibility, he escapes into the sky. On his journey home, he encounters a scene that shifts his legend from monster slayer to savior. Along the coast of Ethiopia, the princess Andromeda is chained to a rock, offered as a sacrifice to a sea monster sent by Poseidon. Her mother, Cassiopeia, had boasted she was more beautiful than the Nereids, and as usual, the gods punished hubris with something involving tentacles. Perseus swoops in, sees Andromeda, and, well, hero plus damsel in distress is a mythological cliché for a reason. He faces the beast. Some say he fought it with sword and courage, others that he unveiled Medusa's head and turned it to stone. Either way, the monster is defeated, and Perseus claims Andromeda as his bride. Finally, he returns to Seriphus. Polydectes, still scheming, mocks him until he pulls Medusa's head from the pouch. The king and his court are instantly frozen, transformed into cold, eternal statues. Justice served, myth style. Perseus makes Dictys king, freeing his mother from tyranny. But remember the prophecy. Destiny waits patiently. Years later, Perseus travels to compete in athletic games. During a discus throw, his aim goes awry, and the disc strikes an old man in the crowd. That man is Achilles, his grandfather, the one who tried to prevent the prophecy long ago. Without meaning to, Perseus fulfills fate. Historians still argue whether this ending was meant to show the inevitability of destiny or simply to tie up a loose thread. Either way, Perseus cannot escape the prophecy woven into his birth. Still, his tale lives on brighter than most. He and Andromeda are honored among the stars, their constellations glittering in the night sky. And in Perseus, we see a hero not only brave, but cunning, a man who triumphs not just with muscle, but with wit, divine favor, and a steady hand holding up a mirror. And with Medusa's head still glowing faintly in its pouch, the myths march onward towards an even larger stage, a conflict that will drag in gods, kings, and mortals alike. For somewhere on a banquet table of the heavens lies a golden apple, inscribed, "To the fairest." And that apple will topple 1,000 ships. And so the shimmer of Perseus's story fades, but the threads of fate are never idle. From the blood of Medusa and the loves of gods and mortals, new generations rise. And out of those tangled family trees grows the spark of one of mythology's greatest wars, the Trojan War. It all begins not on the battlefield, but at a wedding. Thetis, a sea goddess, and Peleus, a mortal, are joined in marriage. Every god and goddess is invited to the feast, except for one, Eris, goddess of strife. Leaving Eris off your guest list is like not inviting your grumpy aunt and then acting surprised when she shows up anyway. Of course, she does, and she brings a gift. It is a golden apple, gleaming in the torchlight, inscribed with 3 simple words, "To the fairest." She tosses it into the crowd and lets chaos bloom. Immediately, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite claim it. 3 powerful goddesses, 1 prize. It's like the worst reality show ever conceived. Zeus, wisely wanting no part in this argument, appoints a mortal judge, Paris, a Trojan prince, known more for his beauty than his wisdom. The goddesses do not play fair. Hera promises him kingship over all Asia. Athena offers victory in war. Aphrodite leans closer and whispers, "I will give you the most beautiful woman in the world." And Paris, thinking with his heart, or perhaps with his eyes, chooses Aphrodite. That choice becomes the hinge of history, because the most beautiful woman in the world is Helen, Queen of Sparta, already married to King Menelaus. With Aphrodite's help, Paris steals her away. Whether by persuasion or abduction depends on which storyteller you ask. Either way, Helen sails with him to Troy. When Menelaus discovers the loss, he does not rage alone. He calls upon all the kings of Greece, bound by an oath they had sworn years earlier when competing for Helen's hand. The oath demanded that they defend her chosen husband against any insult. And so, from this tangled web of promises, love, and divine meddling, a coalition is forged. The Greek fleet gathers under Agamemnon, brother of Menelaus, a king hungry for glory. Among them are names that echo forever: the swift-footed Achilles, the cunning Odysseus, the mighty Ajax, the aged but wise Nestor. Each hero brings not just men, but reputation, and the air is heavy with both ambition and dread. But the gods are not done interfering. At Aulis, where the fleet gathers, the winds refuse to blow. A seer reveals the reason. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, demands a sacrifice for the Greeks' arrogance. The price is Iphigenia, Agamemnon's daughter. Some versions claim he deceives her, promising marriage to Achilles only to lead her to the altar. Others whisper that Artemis, pitying the girl, replaces her with a deer at the last moment. Historians still argue whether the myth was told to highlight Agamemnon's cruelty or to emphasize divine power over mortal lives. Either way, the fleet finally sails. The first blood of the war is spilled not at Troy, but at a small town along the coast. A seer named Calchas guides them. Odysseus plots. Achilles proves his might. And when at last they land on Trojan soil, the war begins in earnest. Yet Troy is no weak prize. Its walls are mighty, said to have been built by Poseidon himself. And within them dwell heroes of equal renown. Noble Hector, the loyal defender of his city. Cunning Aeneas, who carries divine blood. And of course, Paris, whose choice lit the flame. The war stretches not for months, but for years. 10 long years of sieges, raids, and shifting alliances. The Greeks, though strong, cannot breach the walls. The Trojans, though brave, cannot drive the invaders away. And so the conflict simmers, its pot stirred constantly by the gods, who bicker and take sides like children playing with toy soldiers. Hera and Athena, scorned by Paris, side with the Greeks. Aphrodite, protective of her chosen Paris, aids the Trojans. Zeus, ever the balance keeper, sways between both, though not without his own biases. Even minor deities join the fray, turning battles into playgrounds of divine interference. And as the armies clash on the plains of Ilium, the world begins to feel smaller, the myths more intertwined. For soon, the war will narrow to a handful of figures: Achilles with his rage, Hector with his duty, Odysseus with his schemes, and the fate of Troy will hang on both steel and pride. But for now, imagine that golden apple still gleaming faintly, lying forgotten at the bottom of some divine feast hall. A simple fruit, and yet it sparks the greatest war of myth, reminding us that sometimes the smallest choices carry the heaviest costs. The embers of the Trojan War glow hotter now, and the story narrows from kings and oaths to the blazing rage of a single man. The Greeks have besieged Troy for years, but the conflict is less about walls and more about pride. In the center of it stands Achilles, son of the sea goddess Thetis and the mortal king Peleus, the greatest warrior of his age. Achilles is unmatched in battle, but he is also unmatched in stubbornness. His quarrel with Agamemnon, commander of the Greeks, sets the stage for tragedy. When Agamemnon seizes a maiden taken as Achilles' prize of war, Achilles feels dishonored. His pride wounded, he withdraws from battle entirely. Imagine the Greeks' best fighter sulking in his tent while the war rages on. It's both petty and cataclysmic. Without Achilles, the Trojans surge. Hector, prince of Troy and brother to Paris, rises as their champion. Hector is everything a hero should be: brave, honorable, devoted to his city and family. His presence on the battlefield shifts the tide. Greek morale crumbles as Hector drives them back toward their ships. The gods, of course, cannot resist meddling. Athena tricks, Apollo aids, Hera schemes. It becomes less a war of men and more a chessboard of divine egos. Historians still argue whether the myths reflect real conflicts between Bronze Age city-states or whether they were purely literary theater spun by poets to explain ruins already ancient in their day. But back to Achilles. Watching the Greeks falter, his closest companion Patroclus begs for permission to fight. Achilles refuses to return himself, but agrees to let Patroclus wear his armor, hoping the sight will rally the Greeks. It works, for a while. Patroclus fights fiercely, but fate is cruel. Hector confronts him, strikes him down, and strips the armor from his body. News of Patroclus's death shatters Achilles. Grief turns to rage, and rage into action. He returns to battle, a storm given human form. His mother, Thetis, has Hephaestus forge him new armor, shining bronze that reflects both his fury and his doom. What follows is carnage. Achilles slaughters Trojans in droves, unstoppable, untouchable. The river Scamander, choked with bodies, rises against him in wrath. Even the gods must step in to restrain him. Yet nothing can cool his rage until he meets Hector at the gates of Troy. That duel is one of myth's most powerful moments. Hector knows he is doomed. He even considers negotiating, but when Achilles charges, he stands his ground. The clash is swift. Achilles drives his spear through Hector's neck, ending Troy's brightest hope. But his fury does not stop there. He ties Hector's body to his chariot and drags it around the walls of Troy day after day in a display of vengeance so brutal it shocks even the gods. Yet the story softens. Priam, the aged king of Troy and Hector's father, dares to enter the Greek camp at night. He kneels before Achilles, kisses the hand that killed his son, and begs for Hector's body. Achilles, moved by the raw grief and dignity of the old man, relents. He returns the body for proper burial, and in that moment both men see each other's humanity. But peace is fleeting. Achilles himself is destined to die. Guided by prophecy, Paris looses an arrow with Apollo's help, striking Achilles in his one vulnerable spot, his heel. Thus falls the greatest warrior of Greece. His death foreshadows Troy's doom, but also leaves a hole in the Greek army no one else can fill. The war, however, must end, and it ends not with a glorious battle, but with a trick, the Trojan horse. Odysseus, master of cunning, conceives the plan. The Greeks pretend to retreat, leaving behind a massive wooden horse as an offering. The Trojans debate, some warn of treachery, most famously the prophet Laocoon, who cries out, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." But fate has chosen, and the Trojans, in their pride and weariness, wheel the horse inside their walls. At night, Greek warriors hidden within the hollow belly emerge. They open the gates to the waiting army, and Troy, after 10 years of siege, burns. Flames rise, cries echo, gods turn their faces away. A city, once proud, crumbles to ash. From that destruction, only fragments of glory remain. Aeneas carrying his father on his back, a line that Roman poets will one day exalt. Cassandra, cursed with true prophecies no one believes, dragged into slavery. Helen, returned to Menelaus, her beauty still a curse more than a blessing. The Trojan War, for all its heroes and divine meddling, ends as wars so often do, not with justice or honor, but with fire, loss, and the bitter taste of ashes. And yet out of that destruction comes one final journey, the long, wandering tale of a man who longs only to go home. For the war may be over, but the sea is restless, and the gods are not yet done with humanity. The smoke of Troy drifts out over the sea, black and bitter, and in its shadow begins the long wandering of one man, Odysseus, king of Ithaca. If Achilles was the blade of the Greeks, Odysseus was their mind, cunning, persuasive, always scheming. But his cleverness, a gift from Athena, is also what keeps him far from home for 10 long years after the war has ended. The journey begins with the Greeks scattering in all directions, each ship heading for its own homeland. Some reach their shores quickly, others never return at all. Odysseus, however, sails straight into the arms of misadventure. His first stop is the land of the Cecones, where his men, flush with victory, plunder recklessly. But the Cecones rally and drive them back to their ships, many lost before the real trials even begin. Next comes the land of the Lotus Eaters, where the fruit of the lotus makes men forget everything: home, family, even war. Odysseus drags his crew away by force, their minds fogged with sweet oblivion. You can almost picture him muttering, "We don't have time for this, keep moving." Then comes the cave of the Cyclops Polyphemus, a one-eyed giant and son of Poseidon. Odysseus and his men, trapped in the cave, watch in horror as Polyphemus devours some of their number. But the cunning king blinds the giant with a sharpened stake, escaping under the bellies of sheep. His fatal flaw? Boasting as he sails away, shouting his name back to the blinded Cyclops. Polyphemus calls to Poseidon, who from that moment hounds Odysseus relentlessly. The sea grows darker. At the island of Aeolus, keeper of the winds, Odysseus receives a bag containing every gale but the one that will carry him home. His men, thinking it gold, open it. The winds roar free, driving them back to sea. That must have been an awkward crew meeting. They reach the land of the Lastrygonians, giant cannibals who smash ships like toys. Only Odysseus's vessel escapes. From there, he finds Circe, a sorceress who turns men into swine. With Hermes' help, Odysseus resists her spell, and she becomes his ally, and for a year, his lover. Yet even paradise grows stale, and Circe eventually guides him to the entrance of the underworld itself. There, in the realm of the dead, Odysseus speaks to the shade of Tiresias, the blind prophet, who warns him of the dangers ahead, the cattle of Helios, the wrath of Poseidon, and the long, hard road still before him. He also meets his mother's ghost, learning she died of grief during his absence. That moment, quieter than monsters or storms, shows the true weight of his wandering. Onward he sails, past the island of the Sirens, whose songs lure sailors to their doom. Plugging his crew's ears with wax, Odysseus has himself tied to the mast so he alone may hear their haunting music, thrashing against the ropes, longing to follow. Then the straits of Scylla and Charybdis, a six-headed monster snapping sailors from the deck on one side and a whirlpool swallowing ships whole on the other. Odysseus chooses Scylla, losing men but saving the ship. A bitter choice, but leadership often means choosing which losses you can bear. But his men, however, cannot resist temptation forever. On the island of Helios, despite dire warnings, they slaughter the sacred cattle. The sun god demands vengeance, and Zeus obliges, sending a storm that wrecks the ship and drowns all but Odysseus. Alone, he drifts, clinging to wreckage. He washes ashore on the island of Calypso, a nymph who falls in love with him. She offers immortality if he stays, but Odysseus yearns for home. For years he lingers, until finally the gods order Calypso to release him. Even then, Poseidon sends storms to break his raft, until at last he staggers onto the island of the Phaeacians, who hear his tale and give him passage home. And what of home? In Ithaca, his palace is overrun by suitors courting his wife, Penelope, convinced he is dead. She delays them with cunning of her own, weaving a shroud by day and unraveling it by night. Odysseus returns in disguise, testing friend and foe alike. Then, with bow in hand, he reveals himself. The suitors fall beneath his arrows, the halls echoing with both justice and blood. At last, husband and wife are reunited, their bed, carved from the trunk of a living olive tree, still waiting for them. Yet even here, the story suggests the gods are not fully done. Some versions tell of Odysseus fated to wander again to appease Poseidon once and for all. Others let him rest, aged but wise, king once more. Historians still argue whether Homer intended his journey to show the futility of struggle against fate or the triumph of human endurance against divine cruelty. What we know is this: the Odyssey ends where it began, in Ithaca, with home. And yet, as the generations passed, belief in these gods, Zeus, Athena, Poseidon, slowly faded. The myths did not vanish, though. They transformed into stories, poems, constellations, lessons about pride, love, and resilience. And now, here we are, thousands of years later, whispering their tales once more in the quiet dark.
And so, with Odysseus home and the fires of Troy long cooled to ash, we let the tapestry of Greek mythology gently fold itself away. The stories that began in chaos, that leapt from the mouths of titans, that shimmered in the deeds of Perseus, Heracles, and Achilles, come to rest in memory. They are not gone, not really. They drift with us, lingering like echoes in the night air. Take a moment to breathe, slowly and evenly, letting your chest rise and fall. Picture yourself by a calm shore, the water dark and smooth, the stars above scattered like the jewels of Olympus. Each wave is steady, gentle, and every crest carries away the weight of the day. The gods of old may have thundered and schemed, but now they are quiet. Their temples have crumbled, their statues weathered, yet their names still murmur on our lips. Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo. They fade into silence, and that silence is soothing, soft. Your mind may still trace their adventures, the golden apple, the wooden horse, the gleaming shield of Achilles, but the details are no longer sharp. They blur, soften, like shadows in candlelight. And soon even those shadows dissolve into calm darkness. The myths, for all their storms and battles, are at their heart stories of return. Return to order after chaos, to calm after fury, to home after wandering. And so now let yourself return as well. Return to stillness, to rest, to the quiet place waiting within you. Let your breath deepen, let your muscles loosen, let the long river of story carry you toward sleep, slow and gentle. For the journey is complete, and all that remains is peace.